Guatsi, Hopa, Bonjour. As many of us are now in our home communities and working from home or going to school from home, I wanted to come to you from my home. So I'm here in my home in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and we wanted to just welcome you again to our second part of our series. So we're just a little past the middle point of our 10-year journey when it comes from the start of the Native American Cultural Center in the 2000s to when the opening ceremony happened back in 2010. So we're going to bring back Christina Chavez Kelly to tell a little bit more of the story when it comes to the American Indian program and how that impacted the building that is now the American Indian Student Center.
Then Don Pepion retires as director, and then we get a new director of American Indian program. That's Maggie George. And so in March of 2008, Maggie and I already knew that we were going to need additional funding, and we didn't want any cuts. So Maggie requested another $400,000 be added to the budget, but Ben Woods at the end of March of 2008 told her no, there were no monies available. It wouldn't be able to happen. In March of 2008, the Board of Regents approved $3,530,000 from severance tax bonds, general funds, general obligation bonds, and general funds. So by combining those, they came up with $3,530,000. Michael Rickenbacker, who was director of facilities at the time, informed the regions that the Native American Cultural Center would now include 11,000 square feet rather than the 18,000 square feet. We just couldn't find the money to build the larger facility. We didn't give up. We said, hey, 11,000, then as they draw it, we can get money in the future to expand. And so July 2008, another new president, Dr. Guadet Cruzado Salas. But she'd been the Dean of Arts and Sciences here at NMSU. She had been pushing to get faculty, American Indian faculty, so she was very committed. She had worked with some of the American Indian students, and she was committed to make this a reality. She knew the history of how far we had come. And then what happens the same month that Guadet becomes president, Justin McCourse is hired as director of American Indian program.
Justin McCourse, Taos Pueblo, American Indian Program Director, 2008 through 2015. So I'm currently the Assistant Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion at the Burrell College of Osteopathic Medicine. And it certainly was a journey to get to this point where there is a facility here on campus for American Indian students as well as the entire community to experience and celebrate the rich cultures of American Indian communities and students. And I learned early on that one of the former directors of the American Indian program, Dr. Don Pepion, had worked in collaboration with outgoing President Michael Martin and other folks, outgoing Governor Bill Richardson. And so during that time, which was right before I started, there was this dynamic where the governor of New Mexico, the president of NMSU, and the director of the American Indian program, along with the advisory board, the IRD, and the students especially, had all come together. The planets had aligned, and funding had been promised for the creation of a Native American Cultural Center. That was the title that had been positioned at the time. And I remember reading an article published in 2006 that approximately $6.1 million had been designated for the creation of a Native American Cultural Center, this two-story, complete circular design facility that was this amazing architecture and this amazing resource for the community was supposedly committed to being in place. And then transition took place, right? So we know that 6.1 million, a portion of it was state funding and an additional portion was fundraising efforts. And so here comes 2007, 2008. The governor of New Mexico is not reelected, so he transitions out. Or President Michael Martin decides to move on from NMSU, and a lot of the development officers, fundraising officers that were a part of this agreement accepted positions elsewhere. So you have all these players that came together for this $6.1 million facility, but then they depart, and no one knows where things are at the point I arrive.
And Justin met with the students, and Justin had concerns with the name Native American Cultural Center. So in July of 2008, the students, the faculty, the staff, and Justin recommended that the name be changed to American Indian Student Center.
Visions, or when I heard of the name Native American Cultural Center, I understand the intent of it being a cultural center, but from my standpoint, being student focused, which is the purpose of the facility, or the operation and use of the facility, I felt it was better suited as being named American Indian Student Center. Because again, we wanted to have our students feel that, yeah, NMSU cares, and that this facility is here to make a statement that American Indian students do matter. They are a part of the community, and they should have a place on campus where they can feel connected to and comfortable to utilize. And that's where the name American Indian Student came from. And also there were a lot of supporters and alumni who also felt that it should be called American Indian Student Center for that very reason. And so that's the change in the name to American Indian Student Center.
It wouldn't solely be a Native cultural center where people might perceive it as a museum, perceive it as where they could come all the time. It really would be for American Indian Student Centers to have a home away from home, to come and study, to receive tutorial services, to have a quiet place for meditation, to have a kitchen, to have their own kitchen to cook their tribal foods and share with each other. It would be an American Indian Student Center for all American Indian students. No one tribe, no one nation, no one pueblo, to unify all of our people in the one goal of humanity and achieving higher education. Then Provost Bob Moulton in December 2008 took forward the request to name change, and it got approved. Then June of 2008, we get another president, Manuel Pacheco, who supported the construction. Finally, construction starts in August of 2009. So we had broken ground since, what are the 2 years? April of 2006, October 2007, finally construction begins in August of 2009. It was great to see. I mean, it was phenomenal because we're looking there, and I said, Justin, I remember we walked from Garcia Annex. I had to get emotional. We walked over here to see, and just to see when they were clearing all the weeds, the debris, leveling the ground, that's where the building was going to come. Now there had been some adjustments, and they had to accommodate the worship center, and so we got pushed a little further. We had wanted some additional parking for the American Indian Student Center, but it was like, it's really happening. So it was like, man, we're gonna get it. It is going to happen. And then I remember coming one day after work we'd come a lot, but to see some of our students, they had finished some of their rodeo practice and the roping, and they were standing on the sidewalk of the International Mall between Garcia Hall and the construction site, and they were so excited. I'll never forget that moment, because this building was for them and their future siblings, cousins, family members. But to see them, then it was like, Don, Maggie, Justin, Michael, as you stepped into becoming the director, it's worth it. It's all been worth it. And we got it done. Thanks be to God, it was done.
The location picked on campus. I think this location where the American Indian Student Center sits today, it's a respectable place to be on campus. It's a place next to the dormitories. It's accessible. It's a part of the campus community, and it's a highly visible location. And so I think people started to come around it, and they started to see that it was going to happen, and there was going to be a facility where the community our students and the NMSU community would have a community away from home, right? They would have an environment where they would feel comfortable coming to stay and do their studies and receive programming and receive guidance and mentorship, to feel connected to NMSU and feel that they belong here. And so there was a lot of skepticism and doubt about the creation of a Native American Cultural Center. So I started to delve, I started to ask questions. At the time, Dr. Carmen Gonzalez was our vice president for student success, student support services, and she also oversaw the diversity program. So I reported to her, and so she encouraged me to follow up with the development office, with the foundation office, with all these players. And I kept getting the same answer that, oh, that was someone else's effort, and they've since moved on, so we're not where that's at, or we don't know where that's at. And I kept getting that same answer of, we don't know if the money is here. Dr. Pepion kept reiterating that the funding from the state was allocated. The state funding was there, but we didn't know where, and we didn't know who was responsible for advancing it to the creation and the construction of a facility. There were a lot of meetings. Again, people were asking questions. The skepticism was there. People were getting offended with each other because there was that skepticism and doubt. So my role was to try to get to the bottom of it all and find out where things were. Just through interactions with our community, our allies, we found out that the architect at the time, confirming that the state funding was there, that the facility would be constructed. And so so this was probably about 2000. This was during the 2008-2009 academic year. Right around the latter part of that academic year, and probably the spring of 2009, is when information started to rise to the top. And that's when we learned with maybe, I'd say probably about a 4-month window, that if the state funding wasn't encumbered by June 30th, 2009, it was going to revert back to the state. And so, there were these architectural designs that were created for this 2-story, $6.1 million facility, this beautiful facility, but yet those architectural designs were done back in 2006. The recession hits in 2008, 2009, boom, cost increase. We can no longer afford to do a 2-story facility at that amount because we don't have $6.1 million. I can't recall the amount we had, but it was somewhere around $3 million, somewhere around there. So we didn't have the full amount. And so we have to get architectures to redesign the facility. We have to get contractors to bid, to get to go through the funding process, state bidding process, to get the contractor to come on in. So there were all these activities that were happening at the last minute in order to encumber the funds before they expire and go back to the state. And so what a whirlwind of events and activity through these efforts, and through working together with all the different groups on campus, we were able to pull off getting the funds encumbered so they didn't revert back to the state.
Then President Barbara Couture becomes president in January of 2010. She has to go along with it because we've already had 4 months of construction. The money's already allocated. Justin is going to be a bulldog getting this building done. He's got you by his side. We have Tribal Voices working very hard and supportive. We have the Hispanic Faculty Staff Caucus supporting it, Diversity Council supporting it, NMSU supporting it, Faculty Senate supporting it. So internally at NMSU, the support and excitement were there. I still remember one of the articles in the roundup describing the excitement and the students that they had interviewed. So it's coming through. Justin is told in January, get the building done by the fall. Oh yeah, as if he's got full control of construction. He's not a contractor, he's not an engineer, but it's like, oh yeah, and he's not the one making the change orders. Those things were out of his control.
I'd like to thank my mother, who always taught me growing up, you have to be persistent. And it was persistence and asking questions and not giving up and enlisting people to help and enlisting allies and support to make it happen. And one person that I like to give credit to is Michael Ray. At the American Indian program, when we were still in Garcia Annex, when I came into the program, Miss Juanita M. Herrera was our administrative assistant, and Kyler Frank was our student program coordinator. And so they helped with the transition and definitely played a role. And later in my tenure at the American Indian program, we hired Michael Ray as our student program coordinator, who played a role in helping us with the American Indian Student Center and the grand opening. And so from there, Michael Ray and I and Juanita really moved the American Indian program forward to a point where it was established, it was consistent, and our culture had been created where it was a community for the students, for all students, and a community that was here to be a part of the greater community. So we're in the Garcia Annex. We're anticipating moving into the American Indian Student Center. Once the shell of the facility is completed, it's currently not completely filled with furniture, but we're still having the grand opening on October 9th, 2009.
We had a 5-page document with step by step by step. You already know because you had the program ready, both of you guys. You knew who was going to be speaking.
I am the education coordinator. I also am the ANA Tewa Language Project Coordinator. So I wear multiple hats when it comes to my position, but I've always put myself first as the education coordinator because that was what I was originally hired to do. So that's been my main title going on 6 years. It seems like just yesterday that was the center was opening. I remember just having the atmosphere so friendly. I mean, you had people from all different walks of life coming in, just wanting to see what the building was about. And having, that honor of being Miss Native American NMSU and there at the opening is something that I have always cherished and will always continue to cherish, because it was a first for us, going from little Garcia Annex in a building to one little room to this big old place. It shows that we are valued and that we wanted our own space and we wanted a place to call our own, and that it was made possible. It happened. And that day, going in with my family and my younger sister, who's now an Aggie, having her experience that as well, I think she feels comfortable being on campus because there's a place that she can go to be among people who are just like herself, who are experiencing things for the first time, and understanding that now that, coming from a boarding school where there's nothing but Native students to a more diverse campus like NMSU, that you are going to be experiencing different things, but to have a center, a home, so to speak, on campus, it's refreshing, and it's safe. You feel safe, you feel comfortable. So I'm happy that my family was there to experience that with me, and my best friend, and she's African American, and she loved the center, and she was like, man, I wish we had something like this to call our own too, but for now I'm going to come here. So she was always going with me too to the center, and that type of atmosphere, that it's welcoming, that just because you're not Native or you're not from a specific tribe, we're welcoming everybody. So I really appreciated the friendly environment and also being there for the first time.
Wonderful day. And I had been asked to speak on behalf of our Native faculty at the opening, and being there at the building, setting out in the front with that circle behind us. We were, in a sense, we were embraced by that. I mean, that circle has so much meaning in our cultural worldview. But to look out in the crowd and to see our tribal leadership there, to see our students, to have our families there. And I remember one thing that I spoke about in my words was that importance of place, in that it wasn't that the university should be welcoming the tribal nations there, is that this university and every other university stands on tribal lands. But that's also a place of storytelling and story making, in that the center that was constructed and is there for us is part of that storytelling and part of the landscape that is our place as Native people. It's a place of where we go, where we can feel good, where we can be in community. And that's that positive place that sometimes when we get taken down by those things from the outside and the different pressure, it's a place where we can go and feel whole again. And so that's what I remember from that day, was just that the busyness around the time, but also such a happy feeling, and people coming together and seeing something that was built that will take us into the future. So that's what I recall from that particular day.
So the opening ceremony, for me, I was still the student program coordinator for that, but a lot of that was anxiety for me on that day, because we were planning on how is this going to be, what's going to be going on, who's going to be speaking, how many people are going to show up, because we sent out quite a bit of invites. So it was who's going to be here, who's going to show up. So coordinating the volunteers of that day, it was if you see this person, they're the governor of this community. If you see this person, they're the president of this nation or chairperson. And so it was a very interesting time to look at the community that had supported us throughout the state, supported us throughout the region, because it was one of those times where, we talked about it in the previous video when it comes to bringing community leaders and tribal leaders onto our campus. But this was that another time where we were able to do so. And it wasn't because we wanted to pick their brain. It wasn't because we wanted to, get something from them. It's because we were showing them something that NMSU was giving them. This building, was that, 10-year journey that Dr. Pepion first started on in 2000, and now in 2010 we had a building. We had that dream that we planted when it comes to those groundbreakings. The walls are up. There's a roof on the building. We didn't have landscaping at the time, but that was one of those series of unfortunate events that we talk about when it comes to the budget of this building. But we, for a little bit we enjoyed it because it looked like home. Where I'm back on the reservations, do you see grass? You see that landscaping? You see dirt. You see rocks. So for a while there, it was like it was a little piece of the res that was just yanked up from the ground and transported to New Mexico State University. So it was really that nice feeling to see the alumni who I had been in school with, who came on down. I got to see a couple of my colleagues that I went to school with. And it was, again, that celebration of it's here. All that work, all that skepticism, all that, unbelieving that it's going to be here, but it's here. We're in the building. Now, we didn't have the opportunity to move in right away, but that was just one of those, it's going to happen. They can't kick us out now. We have a building, it has our name on it. But it was, just one of those times where family was coming together, where community was coming together. Our tribal leaders, our university leaders, our regent, the elders, they came to the building to, welcome it into the university, welcome it to the rest of the buildings that our students will be utilizing, and really bring this community together in a nice, respectful way.
Fine. And so we move forward with the ceremony. We have dignitaries, representatives, legislators, senators here, and it was a fantastic experience. It was a fantastic journey.
You knew who was going to be saying the prayers. Elder Paul Ortega had been with us at the groundbreakings, had been with us at the grand opening.
Within Native American cultures, it seems to be uniform among most American Indian communities that when a new facility is constructed, that it is first blessed before anything else. And so I wanted to make sure that we bless this facility from the standpoint that it doesn't favor one tribal community, but it's a blessing for all tribal communities to feel safe, to feel connected to. I felt that it was important to have a tribal member from a close tribal community to Las Cruces. And I felt that Mescalero Apache tribe would be a good place to look. We brought down Elder Ortega from Mescalero Apache tribe, who had been involved in cultural program beforehand, to be the person to bless the facility. And so Elder Paul Ortega came through and blessed our facility for us to have a foundation and a place to grow and to really project the future that we talked about earlier for the American Indian Student Center. And so this blessing took place before the grand opening. And I think that's important to note because it's a healthy place to be.
Regent Javier Gonzalez had done such a phenomenal job supporting us at every regent's meeting, talking with every governor. Richardson was still the governor in 2010, and saying, I will help. Senator Mary Jane Garcia still helping. Joe Garcia from the All Indian Pueblo Council, and visiting with those individuals. And then how many of our alumni that never, ever believed that this really could happen. and they came and they saw, and then they believed.
And so that takes place, and then we're moving forward. We're completely out of Garcia Annex with the exception of a storage area. And we're moving forward to utilize the facility. But we realize we don't have tables in the student area, we don't have complete furniture, we don't have complete computers. And so the next phase is under the leadership of Christina Chavez Kelly. She had had previous legislative experience working at the legislature, lobbying, and so we made an effort to connect with Ricardo Rial, who is our governmental relations person, and work together to make an effort to raise funding from the state level to fund further acquisition of furniture, computers, kitchen items for the facility to be complete. And so Ricardo Rial connected us with some legislators up north, and one legislator in particular, yes, Legislator Sandra Jeff. She became a champion for our cause and really took on the effort to secure funding for the American Indian Student Center. She was the one that made it possible for us to get funding allocated to complete the American Indian Student Center. So definitely credit goes to Christina Chavez Kelly, Representative Jeff, Ricardo Rial, and all the other senators and legislators who helped support the latter part of the funding for the American Indian Student Center.
We thank you for joining us once again as we continue to tell the story of the American Indian Student Center. We look forward to being with you once again as we continue the further conversations about the 10 years since the building has been in existence. But we also want to look to the people we've been talking with as we look forward to the next 10 years that the American Indian Student Center will have. Thank you again for being with us, and we'll see you again.